We were taught that fairies belonged to old stories. Yet today people are encountering them quietly, unexpectedly, in ordinary life. I'm Claire Casely, a fairy whisperer and your guide on this journey. On the Fairy Whispering podcast, I speak with guests who've met these beings at the edges of perception and the thresholds of the everyday. To catch a fairy whisper, you have to listen closely. Listen with me. Hello and welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast. I'm your host, Claire Casely. This episode is a re-release of an episode I recorded and released back in March 2022. I'm re-releasing it now because I've mentioned this case in my books, The Heart of Pixieland, West Country Fairies and Their Haunts. It's about the Scoriton Mystery, which is the story of a man called Arthur Bryant who lived in the village of Scoriton on Dartmoor in the 1960s. In April 1965, Arthur had a very strange encounter with a spacecraft that landed in a field and 3 occupants. His story was investigated by a MUFON researcher called Eillen Buckle, and she wrote up her findings about the case in her book, The Scoriton Mystery, Did Adamski Return? The subtitle refers to the UFO experiencer Adamski, who lived in the USA. He died in April 1965, and the next day Arthur had his experience. The strange thing is that one of the beings identified himself as Adamski. That's how Arthur interpreted the name. And I included this case in my books because of the parallels between fairy experiences and close encounters with extraterrestrials and also light phenomena. It's a really fascinating case. What you'll hear next is my original intro to the episode and my conversation with my guest, Simon Tucker. 5:30 p.m. on the 24th of April 1965. Ernest Arthur Bryant, a 51-year-old gardener, ex-commando and family man, is heading out for his familiar evening stroll. He says goodbye to his wife and 3 children, closes the cottage door, and walks out along the Devonshire country lanes. On a rough track high above his village, Arthur finally reaches Scoriton Down, on the wild and lonely fringes of Dartmoor. He turns to look back towards the village. A large saucer-like object suddenly appeared from thin air over a nearby field, and 3 figures appeared from the craft and beckoned Arthur towards them. Did Arthur Bryant really have an otherworldly encounter that evening? Is there a more earthly explanation? Could it be a hoax, or was something more sinister at play? Arthur Bryant's story of a contact experience with an otherworldly spacecraft and its occupants was recorded in detail by Eillen Buckle in her 1967 book, The Scoriton Mystery, and it's such a fascinating story. In this episode, I wander around Scoriton with local writer Simon Tucker and we discuss the story. I came across a post by Simon about the Scoriton Mystery whilst researching this story online. Our conversation is interspersed with more details about the case. This is Adelphos, Adelpho, Close Encounter of the Third Kind on Dartmoor. Adelphos, Adelpho.
I wrote the original write-up for a blog called Above Top Secret because I'd moved to Dartmoor, having always loved it, and I wanted to write about some of the more mysteries. And the Scoriton one has always intrigued me. Oh well, since I'm up here, I'll do it. I'll have a scan around the web and see what there is out there about what actually happened. Because, I mean, as when we were talking just now, as I said, there's only two possibilities. It either happened or it was a hoax. It can't be anything else. That's let's say it was a hoax. Well, a hoax needs a reason. Now, there can be a number of them, but first and foremost the reason to do a hoax is to get a reaction. Now, sometimes that reaction is just like you did to a friend at school, just for a laugh.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because the reaction itself is the goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that tends to be more of a serial hoaxer. And there's the idea that hoaxing done to gain some sort of advantage. It could be financial, And there were a lot of stories in the news around that time, so perhaps, I'm not saying this is the case here, but perhaps you might wanted to have sold that hoax story to a newspaper in some sort of financial advantage. That could be another one. But there is another one as well. We know this took place in America due to freedom of information requests we've seen.
Yeah.
There was after the big flap that started with the Roswell incident.
Yeah.
There was a network that formed in America called MUFON, MUFON.
Oh yes, I've heard of those.
You've heard of MUFON?
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, you saw something unusual, you reported it,
Yeah.
and somebody from MUFON came along and did their investigation. But then what we found out later from Freedom of Information Act is MUFON was actually completely was started and run by the US Air Force. And their job was to convince you that what you saw was anything than what you actually saw, which was some kind of experimental or new aircraft.
Yeah. Well, they're still doing that, aren't they?
That still goes on now. So was that happening in England at the time when this went on? That's another possibility. There was some advancements in aeronautics going on at the time.
Yes. I've seen a little bit about this, that the Germans had created the FAL, which is very much like a flying saucer, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so was it something experimental that they were trying out on the public to see how people would react?
We do know that was happening in the United States.
Yeah.
So it's not unreasonable to assume that something similar was happening here. And I think we can't rule that out. That is a possibility. Also, talking about the man who saw it himself, Mr. Bryant, it's worth knowing a few things about him. He served as a commando in World War II.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a man given to flights of fancy. And a lot of what he said, for instance, he said that the occupants that came out of the whatever it was appeared to be having difficulty breathing. And you see, as a commando, he would certainly recognise that if somebody was having trouble breathing. Those guys were all about fitness and endurance. So there is that.
3 beings came out of the craft and beckoned Arthur over to them. He says he lost all sense of fear and climbed over the gate into the field. The beings were dressed in what Arthur described as diving suits with helmets, and they were surrounded by light. When they removed their helmets, Arthur noticed that they had difficulty in breathing at first. The central being of the group was a humanoid, dark-eyed, dark-haired young man, around the age of 15, and the other 2 beings had high foreheads, blonde hair, and blue cat-like eyes. All of them had 4 fingers on each hand. The humanoid boy said that he was called Adamski and that they were all from Venus. He then relayed several messages to Arthur that mentioned someone called Des or Les, and Arthur was given a tour of the craft before leaving, and the being saying that they would return in a month's time to provide proof of Mantell. I think a lovely touch to this story is that Arthur told Eillen and Norman that afterwards, I returned home for a cup of tea. This is such a British thing. I think that's wonderful.
I mean, what advantage can we tie from this as a hoax? What would be the reason for doing it? Now, was he somebody who just wanted the attention? Was he one of those serial hoaxers we talked about?
From what I've read, I mean, I've only read the book. This is all very new to me.
Right.
Only found out about this case about a month or so ago from someone else, and I've just finished reading the book by Eillen Buckle, and she goes in. She's very thorough, very convincing. I mean, she went into a lot of detail, and the way he comes across is just a very ordinary bloke that didn't know anything about UFOs. He wasn't even interested in them.
That does seem to be the case. Yeah.
So I, he was this very ordinary guy. Apparently he didn't have many books on his bookshelves. He wasn't into reading. The story after he died was that, his wife said, probably, I think, to make people go away, was that he was writing a script for a film. So that doesn't add up to somebody that wasn't interested in reading or... What do you think about how genuine he was as a person? It's hard to tell this, 50, 60 odd years afterwards.
Well,
isn't it?
I mean, I know I'm probably coming off as, a bit of a moulder in this, but the thing is, I'm actually quite cynical about the whole thing of these unidentified flying objects being something from outer space. In most cases, it's misidentification of normal phenomena. It's people's imagination getting carried away with them. What I'm trying to say is that he certainly didn't have anything to say that he'd looked into the subject to come up with this kind of stuff that he came out with. So he must have had quite an imagination to come up with a hoax as elaborate as that, or something actually genuine happened. So I don't. As I said at the beginning, there is only two possibilities: it happened, or he made it up. It's one or the other.
He kept to his story. That's the striking thing.
These are the messages that Arthur received from Adamski. Adamski said that he'd been a friend of Des or Les, and that only now did he realise all the work that Des had put into the Sanskrit. Adamski said that he and the Venusians were going to bring proof of a wonderful existence and life beyond our understanding. He warned of the dangers of forces from another planet called Epsilon, which were taking people from this world for what he called procreation purposes. When Arthur asked how we would know these forces had arrived, all three of the visitors were very amused, and Adamski replied that they were already here in the guise of what he termed poltergeists. Before they left, Adamski told Arthur, "Wait for the blue lights in the evenings. In a month's time we will bring proof of Mantell." Arthur said that he had no idea what this meant. The name suggested a foreigner to me, he said. I remember thinking to myself, if only people could have been here to see this today. Adamski seemed to know what I was thinking and said, "Great things are done by those alone." Arthur also said afterwards that he'd had no prior knowledge of Desmond Leslie either. Then before they left, the two other beings spoke. They said, "We are grateful and thank you." Arthur said that with that, I jumped to the ground, moved to a distance of 10 to 12 yards away and called goodbye. They all waved quite cheerily in return before the door closed. I could not detect the door from the outside once it was shut. In a second or so, the saucer went up to a height of 10 or 12 feet and suddenly vanished. The sheep all looked up to the direction of flight. This lasted 5 or 6 minutes, after which they began to get up and move around.
I'm always a little bit sceptical about government conspiracies. One of the things is we've certainly seen over the years is governments are not that good at keeping secrets. In fact, they leak like sieves.
Yeah.
The only people really that are worse at keeping secrets is the high-ranking military. So this whole thought of a government conspiracy, sometimes I'm a little bit sceptical about that, to say the least. Do you remember back in the 90s there was what was known as the flying triangles being sighted?
Yes, yeah.
Right, well I saw one. I wasn't
did
alone.
You? Yeah.
I was on Dartmoor as it happened, even though I was living in Torquay at the time. I was with a few people, we saw one. Not just there, my brother was somewhere else. He saw it too. It was reported in various different locations. 3 lights, triangle thing. Okay. Right, if you wanted to keep something secret, why would you put 3 big lights on it? So yeah, the idea of testing a reaction, I like that theory.
Yeah, why would you light something up so everybody could see it?
There's no point, it's like with stealth technology, isn't it? You don't know it works until somebody sees it.
Yeah.
So you have to put it where it might be seen to see if the stealth's working or not. So yeah, I quite like that idea. Yeah.
So what's your sort of personal feeling about the story, the Scoriton Mystery? I mean, do you think it was... I know you could say it was a hoax, he hoaxed it, or do you think that it was something that he did experience? I mean, some people say it's because of he had a brain tumour.
No evidence for that.
No.
No evidence for it.
So so that was just speculation at the time.
Yeah. It was. It's the reason this one's gone on as long as it has, I think, is in part is because the more you look into it, the more mysterious it gets.
Yeah, and everybody loves a mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that it didn't. What he describes as some kind of vehicle landing, people claiming to be from somewhere else, not human, all that kind of thing. There's nothing to say that happened or has happened anywhere. There's no video footage of that ever happening. So I don't know. I think more to the question is, if he did hoax it, what was his motivation?
Yeah.
I think if we can find that, I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
And the chances of finding that now are perhaps not great.
And you think, I mean, when you think of day-to-day life and how busy our lives are now, I mean, obviously it was quite a lot simpler in those days, in the 60s maybe, but he still had a busy life. He was a dad, a couple of kids, handyman. I mean, I don't think he could be bothered or had the time to to go about creating, or thinking, I'll go out. I mean, the idea of him dropping the parts and finding them. I mean, unless he thought, I'd better create more of a story now I've told this story, I better sort of back it up with something. That's the only reason I can think of him wanting to manufacture evidence or... Yeah.
I hadn't heard the one about the film script before, and I must admit that would explain it. that would put an explanation onto all of it, because as you point out, he's a man with a full life. So a hoax for the sake of publicity for what he was about to do, which might lead to an improvement in his lifestyle or something, you know. Maybe he was thinking of his retirement. I'm not suggesting that's the case, because there's no reason to believe he was a dishonest man. You know, so I don't know. There was a lot of stuff like that going on at the time, and there were a lot of hoaxes going on at the time. There was a lot of misidentification of ordinary things, such as the flying cross.
Oh yeah, tell me a bit more about the flying cross.
It's technically only just touches on Dartmoor.
Yeah.
Because they were on, these police were, I think they were based out of Holsworthy.
Right.
These two police officers driving late at night into the early hours of the morning on a patrol.
Yeah.
But it was later proved by the astronomer at the time. I think he was the astronomer royal. It's like, clearly, when you look at the position of Venus, what was going on was these police officers were driving towards this cross over the undulating terrain of Dartmoor, Venus being low on the horizon, and it just really was quite simply that. You can understand how they thought it was the cross, because through a windscreen, the light distorts, get what you almost would call the classic star shape. So you can understand that, and with the positioning of Venus at the time and the direction they were travelling in as they reported it, that explains it completely. So yeah, as hoaxes go, it's a good one.
He's captured some really key details to create quite a complex puzzle for people to try and solve, because Eillen Buckle and Norman, they were on a wild goose chase, weren't they?
Yeah.
And they even started receiving their own messages through a tape recorder, so say, that had been captured. So like the story just seemed to get more and more complex the more that they looked into it.
Yeah, it did. I mean, they also mentioned their concern for what was going on with nuclear power and nuclear weapons, these visitors. And it's funny how that became kind of standard UFO visitation text. Aliens who visited us all expressed their concern about that. But this, as far as I know, is the first instance of that.
One of the most famous cases is Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah.
Where that same message is given, isn't it? About the concern over all the UFOs had been seen over that facility where they had been keeping nuclear warheads. Is that right?
That's right. They would keep there, yeah. Well, Rendlesham Forest it's one of the few cases I know of where even some quite hardened cynics who've written books can't discount what happened there and don't have a good explanation for it. I've heard some ridiculous explanations for it, which completely cannot have happened. But even the most reliable book I consider I've read, which was by a retired US Air Force general, and he says he can't explain that one away completely. Something happened. Something definitely happened.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, some of the explanations of, it was the lighthouse.
Orford Ness, yeah.
Shining through the forest.
I think US airmen that have been in that location would know that.
Yes.
Would suddenly be surprised by it.
Well, this is interesting, as you say, because Mr. Bryant, he was an ex-serviceman as well, so he would have had a good sense of what was military aircraft.
I would have thought so.
He probably had a good sense of the night sky as well.
On 7th of June 1965, between 10:30 to 11 p.m, Arthur Bryant was sitting in his cottage in Scoriton when he heard a loud humming noise outside. He went outside and saw a small blue lighted object crossing the sky above his house. He followed its path and saw it descend a few fields away. The next morning he went to where he estimated the object had come to Earth. where he found withered foliage and several pieces of metal of somewhat unfamiliar appearance, and a glass vial containing silver sand and a piece of paper with the words Adelphos, Adelpho in classical Greek, which means brother to brother. The pieces of metal were later identified as pieces of World War II aircraft. Had Arthur received proof of Mantell? Later, a student in Exeter corroborated Bryant's story with a similar sighting that he had had on the same night.
What happened afterwards? Because it seemed to just go cold, didn't it?
It did. And then somebody called Rich Reynolds looked into it more. Again, I haven't read his research on that, but he seemed to think there was something in it. And there was also this mention of some artefacts, because in his encounter with the occupants of the vehicle, we'll call it, they said they would come back and give him some artefacts. Untold were then produced, but turned out to be nothing more than World War II aircraft components. And also afterwards, I think the story made quite a few of the villagers at the time a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes. Well, one of the stories I did on my podcast a couple of episodes ago was about the hairy hands.
Oh yeah.
At Postbridge. And similarly, I mean, that was in 1924. At the time, it created such upheaval in the area, and people were just fed up of the story being in the papers.
Yeah.
So I can understand with something as outlandish as that story of his, that people wanted to dampen it down and just get rid of it and say, look, just leave us alone.
I think it also helps to understand that if we place it in the time when it took place, it was quite a different time. The Cold War was full on, and Britain was already quite unsettled. Ministers, military officers had been ensnared in espionage by, attractive Russian female spies. And Britain was already, quite skittish. And maybe all this UFO stuff was just possibly more propaganda to further unsettle. Or maybe, it was what they were seeing were Russian invading aircraft. It's a different time today. I know what's going on with Russia at the moment, but back then the Cold War was very real and looked very likely to turn hot. And you can understand how that would have made people nervous.
Yes.
I
was just wondering about this idea that tends to be out there in perhaps the UFO conspiracy community, that a lot of these events are staged.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting as well that, I think it's 1978, Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out.
Yeah.
So say, whether it's just speculation, I've heard that he had some inside information to be able to create that film. Was that incident that Mr. Bryant observed some kind of stagecraft, some kind of theatrical show or experiment by whoever from an earthly source as a way of saying, well, how would people react if aliens did land?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know what was meant to have happened when War of the Worlds was broadcast and people went into a mass panic.
Yes.
But actually that didn't happen. A few people called the local station, but there wasn't a mass panic.
No.
So it could well be that to test the reaction of something like that.
Yeah.
That's certainly possible.
Retired policeman Roger Wiley and Clifford Waycott stuck to their story of the sighting from October 1967. Clifford said it wasn't a star, it was bright, it was white, and it wasn't anything that I have seen before or since. They said that they had never been given an explanation for what they saw. Instead, they were advised to play it down by the powers that be.
Well, this doesn't seem like a case of, that is some serious misidentification.
Yeah. I'm going to say, how can you misidentify a craft
Yeah,
in a field
yeah.
with three beings that get out?
And the detail he goes into
Yeah.
the fact that they didn't have opposable thumbs. Well, how do you create technology without that? I mean, it's like a cat trying to paint, isn't it? Or something. How do you do it?
Yeah. Well, the theory is that perhaps they were so advanced that they didn't need to use
Yep.
tools anymore.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the theory I've heard.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be lots of explanations, couldn't there?
What was extraordinary about the names mentioned by Arthur is that they all seem to relate to actual people. They were interpreted by Eillen and Norman as Adamski, meaning George Adamski, who was a famous UFO experiencer who had died on the 23rd of April 1965, the day before Arthur's experience. Could this be Adamski? And could Des or Les be Adamski's friend Desmond Leslie, a famous paranormal researcher of the time? Desmond Leslie had written in Adamski's obituary that he believed Adamski would try to return in a reincarnated version. So, was this him? Was this Adamski returned in the form of Adamski that Arthur met? Thomas Mantell was a US Air Force captain who had supposedly crashed when he flew into a UFO.
I mean, Mr. Bryant was, I said he was a commando in World War II, so
Yeah.
he probably wouldn't have been somebody that was easily panicked.
No.
I believe he came from a Romany background and was sort of connected with horses and that kind of thing, from what I understand. So he seems to be quite a down-to-earth character, I think. But if he was writing a script for a film, which is something I hadn't heard before, that's an interesting one.
These are some impressions given about Arthur Bryant's personality and demeanour in the book by various people who met him. Eillen Buckle says that prior to their meeting with Arthur Bryant, she and Norman Oliver expected him to be, quote, a charlatan or a candidate for the lunatic asylum. She continues, it did not take long for us to perceive that here was someone who could not be assigned either of these aforementioned categories. Bryant assured them that what he was going to divulge was nothing but the truth, and that he had spent many sleepless nights and restless days with the secret of his April encounter preying on his mind. It was a relief to get it off his chest, and he hoped Eillen and Norman would believe him. He seemed genuinely bewildered and perplexed by what the space people had said to him. He said he hadn't read any UFO books or publications, although he had read of the recent Warminster sightings in the newspaper. That was another famous case of the time. And others in the book commented that Bryant seemed to be an intelligent and absolutely honest man. He told his story in a quiet and factual way, and he gave the impression that he could have been in a more authoritative job than a prison officer, but that he said he'd found security and peace in the gardening work that he did. So he sounds a very sort of humble man, very conscientious as well. The fact that he'd been troubled by this sighting and it genuinely played on his mind, and he wanted to do the right thing and pass this information on to the right authorities.
Does it normally take the form of a walk then, that you do?
Yeah, I trained as a natural mindfulness guide.
Something I know a little about.
The act of walking and talking seems to get the brain working and open people up a bit more, and it's also, I'm also interested really in the landscape as well. Why would something like that happen here?
Yeah, I think that's got a bearing on it personally.
The landscape around Scoriton is very watery. There are two rivers that come down from the moors, Holybrook and the River Mardle. There is a lot of minerals in the area and quartz. Water and quartz are both conductors of psychic energy, according to paranormal theories.
And I would think with his training as well, he would have been trained to be very factual and honest.
See what he saw, say what he saw. Yeah, I agree. I do agree. A World War II commando is a guy who's going to know how to keep his wits about him.
Yeah.
Under pressure, not so likely to panic. So almost certainly. Yes. I mean, some of the ones I've heard about Rendlesham Forest, some of them are just ridiculous. That it was the SAS testing the Americans. That just would not have happened because US forces in the UK are armed with live ammunition, and you don't go surprising them by attacking their base without, if you're doing it for exercise, you're warned, and that just would not have happened. No, I do think that it's a good one. If he hoaxed us, he did a very good and very convincing job. He really did.
And the main detail, or one of the main details from the story that I really think's amazing is the robe with the rose as well, which is another sort of detail that is hard to know how Bryant would have known about, because that was something that had been communicated through. The
robe with the rose, was this, is this in the book?
It's in the book that when Bryant went aboard the spaceship, the flying saucer, and was looking around the rooms, that in one of the rooms there was a purple robe across a couch with a rose. He said it was finer than embroidery, but let's say it was embroidered on the sleeve.
Oh, right.
It was something a detail that was very much connected with him.
When Arthur was given a tour of the saucer, he noticed a purple robe on one of the couches with a red rose embroidered on one sleeve. Desmond Leslie later confirmed that the description of the robe tallied with the one given by George Adamski by the Saturnian Council in March 1962. This was described by Adamski in Report on My Trip to Saturn. Eillen and Norman checked whether Arthur Bryant had subscribed to any of the magazines that this article appeared in. He did not. Eillen surmises, how could he have known these things if he was not in fact telling the truth?
And it was one of those details that unless Bryant had read in detail UFO literature from all over the world, he wouldn't have known about.
Right.
So there's just these little details like that make you think, well, if it's a hoax, then how would he know about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another one.
Yeah.
It just really serves to deepen the mystery.
Yeah.
See, as I say, we do keep coming back to the same thing. Either fake.
Yeah. Hi.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was either a fake or it wasn't. We keep coming back to that.
Yeah. So
a lot of trouble to go to.
Yes. And the other interesting thing that maybe, I can understand why, but the author, Eillen, she just disappeared.
Oh.
She disappeared from the whole. After writing that book, she gradually disappeared from the whole UFO scene. And I've looked, if you Google for her, you can't find her online. There's nothing about... It's like she's been wiped from the face of the internet. Like
Right.
she wanted to disappear. So, which I can understand if she was under a lot of scrutiny after writing that book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe that was...
Yeah.
Just wanted no more to do with it at that point.
Yeah,
Perhaps she
yeah.
didn't like the pressure she was coming under from somewhere.
Yeah.
I suppose the example that we talked about earlier of the MUFON thing,
Yes.
you know, maybe there was some sort of other pressure. You know, the idea that this was... What was witnessed was actually some sort of test.
Yeah.
Some sort of... Something that was...
Thank you for listening to the end, and thank you to my guest Simon Tucker. It was a real pleasure to walk with Simon and to discuss this very unusual story. This story gave me a lot to think about, as I said at the start, and the more I've read about Arthur's story, which he stuck to his dying day, and indeed was interviewed on more than one occasion about the story, he was unflinching in his retelling of the same details. Eillen Buckle stood by Arthur Bryant to the end. After Arthur passed away, Norman Oliver did a follow-up book, which I've not been able to get hold of. I'd love a copy if anybody has one, which was like a what happened next. He did a complete 360 in his opinions about the case. I, for one, feel that Arthur was a very genuine person, and I feel he was telling the truth, that he'd had a very real experience. Whether that experience was something extraterrestrial or otherwise, I'm not sure. But he definitely had that experience from his emotional response to it and the way he stuck to the story. I feel he was telling the truth. Whether any of the artefacts that Arthur found were related to the visitors bringing proof of Thomas Mantell, we'll never know. However, I do find the message that Arthur found in the glass vial very apt for these times. Brother to brother. It's such a wonderful message to keep close to our hearts, especially with what's happening in the world at the moment. If we can stand shoulder to shoulder, open our hearts to all of life in the universe, maybe that wonderful place that the visitors told Arthur about will come to be one day. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now, and remember to keep your eyes on the skies, especially in this era of disclosure.